Hello, people. Welcome to another edition of Dose of Drew. And tonight, on Friday Night Knives, we have the Vosteed Thornton. A nice double, mixed G10 here that looks like a bolster, but it's all one singular G10. A new entry from Vosteed. Modified sheep's foot blade. Got the, bellied sheep's foot. Thumb stud, button lock. Make sure I get that 14C28N steel. Interesting pivot, captive pivot, single screw at the back, holding it through the nested liners that poke up. So we've got a nice cinching back there. And fresh from wherever it had been hiding, I found it, my pink measuring tape. Alrighty, so from tip to tail, we are just over 7.5, maybe 7 5/8, and tip to scale, we're at about 3 3/8, maybe 3 1/4, somewhere in between there. All right, so not too bad. Blade overall, about an inch tall. Overall, the thing's sitting right around that inch spot. Not a bad little thing, this Thornton here. Let's take a look at the weight on this bad boy. All right, 3.58. So we're talking about almost 3.6, close enough to 3.6 ounces, just over 3.5 ounces. Not light, but not super heavy. It's got a nice solid feel to it. Let's get some of these relational measurements here. First up, the Spyderco sandwich. You may notice a difference here to the Paramilitary 2. If you haven't noticed it, it's the scales. All right, and the Para 3 lightweight as well. As you notice, Thornton is much, much closer to the Para 3, especially in hand space, but more blade, which is interesting. And less hand space, but similar blade length to the Paramilitary 2, which is an interesting little bit here. This, by the way, is the Flightanium scales. Did get the linen micarta. Flightanium, just a hit for Flightanium. They make some of the best out there, if you ask me. Para 3 lightweight is already lightweight. And it's just a blur. And, of course, not just any link, but, a random link. Interesting bit here. Again, hand space similar to the blur. Not the same. It's really hard to get kind of edge with the curves on the blur, but very similar hand space if you count the choil. Very similar hand space to the blur, more blade, and similar hand space to the leak, but larger and more hand filling. So it's fitting into an incredibly nice little niche. Has this nifty little pin tail, kind of drop tail, but it goes up a little bit. This is higher than any other spot along the spine, making for an interesting ergonomic experience for sure. And the Benchmade bug out, really close, right in that EDC size, right? And of course the Civivi Elementum, similar hand space, maybe a little bit more overall edge length if you count the choil, the curve and stuff like that, and actually more hand space than the bug out and a similar blade length. So a lot going for it right there. It's a EDC shape that is definitely different. And of course, this is it compared to my Weenar. Though it may be slightly longer, my Weenar has that upward curve and is a little bit thicker. That's all that matters. It is the girth in this case that matters. All right, let's see if we can't do a couple of other. We'll do this real quick here for the thickness on the blade stock. Hey, 0.13. So it's a relatively thick blade stock. A little bit over an eighth, closer to 3.5 millimeters or so. See if I can't get this. This is really thin right behind the edge. 14 thousandths behind the edge, and that is right behind it. Very, very thin behind the edge. Very, very thin. Incredibly thin behind the edge. 14C28N, wipe some of that stuff off there. Oh, it's still there. Been used, tested it. You can see there's little bits of markings on. This thing has had its run of testing, and it's really nice, right? We'll get into this here damn nice categories now, where we start talking about what this actually does. And the design is interesting. It's got this pintail, this modified sheep's foot, sort of a, not really a choil, but they give you this incredibly flat spot, a spot that's obviously considerate of putting your finger there in a pinch grip. It's not necessarily a choil where it's, you know, designed and designated, hey, here's a finger spot. But this is one that doesn't have to be. You got sort of this pintail, kind of reminds me of the CJRB Echo in a way, except it's got this upward camel hump instead of just going straight down. So you got tucks into your hand, really nice. Very clean on the lines. I really wish it wasn't the shiny silver, but it is what it is. Very clean on the lines, right? Single screw, single pivot, button lock, single pivot, single screw, and the clip, which is a decent bent clip. Vosteed's doing pretty good on those. And the G10 backspacer, it is very weight reduced. It has a, let me see if I can get that. You can see the holes right there, right? There's a lot of them, right? Those are all weight reduction. So the fact that it's still at over 3.5 ounces is all about that pivot. Right, the stop pin is something that is it is not attached. In fact, I can see it. It's a captive stop pin in there. That is, and so like as you see right there. Let's see if I can get it. If I can get the shiny so you can see it too. Don't know if I'll be able to. Just don't know. Let me see. Might be able to right there because there's the button and then there's a pin right there in front that doesn't move and the pivot goes around it. So it's right there. It's hard to see. There you might be able to see it, right? See how that moves around it? So there's a pin that's captive in between there, part of the nested liners or all that sort of stuff that makes this a huge, like that goes right up. It makes for an incredible little flat spot where you put your finger and that there's no gap. It's just continuous metal and G10. But it really, this design part on the ergonomics is fantastic. The saber grip as you come back does great, right? If you have smaller hands or you want to choke back, it does. There's no lanyard option. If you want to do a lanyard, you got to go through the clip, which would be interesting because if there's this, you almost could use a lanyard on this if you're choking way back on it. You really could. But here's the other thing. You don't need to. It's got a great pinch grip. It does that. The aesthetics, it's knifey enough that you know what it's for, but it's also kind of just demur. It kind of doesn't show off. It's like, oh, it's a knife. And then you go like that and someone's like, okay, are you going to open my box? Giggity. Right, so it's got an aesthetic that is both toned down while being definitely unique. Right? I don't want to say completely unique, but just it stands out as being different. And some of it has to do with a lot of the other bits, but it looks good, right? The design on the ergonomics, how different features fit in. The jimping is long and over. It's got this really high flat grind, really high saber grind, if you want to call it, with a swedge that goes all the way out to the tip, so to speak, or out to where it rolls down to the tip here. The mechanics. It's a front flipper. You can slow roll it. This one to go to the liner lock. It does the flick. And as you see, it's just absolute drop shot. Here's the other thing. This button, I have to roll my thumb over to get it to go. It is basically flush with the top. Now, can I make it go? Yes. Right? If I squeeze, if I'm in this, I have to get out of a grip, right? I have to get out of my grip and roll onto the button to make it work. That's safe. I would prefer it be crowned more, but it is nicely beveled so that the edge isn't sitting up and it's something that's really easy to click on. So that's actually really good. I have not always been interested in getting more Vosteed button locks because I've ran into more than a few. More than one, I'll put it that way. More than one that didn't work well. That were too easy to disengage while you were gripping the knife. And this one, your thumb is either off the button or it's below it in order to get really good. Or, you know what I mean? It's off the button. You have to roll your thumb intentionally onto it. That's awesome. That's an awesome design and mechanics feature right there. Just in the right place. It's just slightly below the surface. You have plenty of room still going there. And the disengage point is very easy to get to. It's easy to control through the disengagement point. Right? You can really, let's see if I can do this without too much. No, I can't, but here. All right, sitting right there. This is how easy it is to do. Even on the sole. Very, very well tuned. Extraordinary design. Mechanics are almost perfect. They're very, very well done and well designed. Good job, Vosteed. For times when I've had button locks from Vosteed that I did not enjoy, I was not, they weren't safe. I got rid of them. Wasn't happy about it. This one is definitely bringing it back. Another noteworthy point, Vosteed's killing it on the value, you guys. Yeah, they have some good ones, but some of these other ones in the 14C28N, Nitro V, 154CM, and all that, they're bringing the value here. The noteworthy points to this, it's the Thornton. I believe it's designed by someone else. It has a button lock. 14C28N with a thin edge. It's going to have a tough edge with decent edge retention. If this is up in the 60 to 61 Rockwell, this is going to be really decent edge retention. 14C28N goes down with, like everything else with the hardness, but even more so. I shouldn't say even more so. It's definitely more impacted by lessening of the hardness because it doesn't have any hard carbides to pick up the slack where the iron carbides are, and so on and so forth. And you can start looking at weird things. So, but 14C28N is fantastic. It's got an incredible blade style. It's got a swedge. The noteworthy points are the cohesiveness of this design and the budget price point this thing comes in at. Okay, that's really one of the huge, and I mean huge, bits about this thing. It is fantastic on that. Right? It does a great job on all that sort of stuff. And I believe that's its intended purpose. There's no way, it's not even pretending to be fancier. This is a G10, nice looking. It's got the blue and black, which, yeah, don't even bring up that old song. But yeah, there's not a whole lot of worry on what it's going to do. It's inexpensive. 14C28N is going to be tough. There's really just nothing else to concern yourself. Like, what else is this supposed to be? Well, it's got this pintail. It's decent in the, the saber grip. It's really good in the saber grip. You can choke up multiple ways to really utilize it. It's a blade you can utilize multiple ways in your hand effectively, not have to why am I you can use it effectively, not have to move your hand around, not have to adjust your grip for the knife. My goodness, why was I having so much trouble? So yeah, it's really, 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 really good at that. And it's inexpensive. This is below 70. I want to say this is $59, but I may have, it is quite possible I don't have that right. But it is what it is. It's under 70, I'm pretty sure. You may not like that, that idea, but it does a lot of good things there. And that gets me to that cost to value ratio. 14C28N, G10, button lock. Great ergonomics, deep carry clip that is a little bit long, but it makes it fit in the hand in just about every grip, right after the knuckle. If I choke up, it's right, my finger's right there. For the size of the knife, right, if I choke up, my fingers go there. Wow. The clip is just long enough to fit right. It just does its job. And that's important. You know, quite honestly, that's an important thing. It does it all well. Its cost to value ratio is ridiculous. It is ridiculously high. And that's, I'm not even trying to get you. Let me see if I can get this one. I think I want to say this might even be $80. This might be $79. Or that might be the other. There's colors. There's other stuff in there. I honestly, I'm really having a hard time remembering. It's either $69 or $79. It does make a difference on the cost to value ratio. It really does. And I want to make sure and call that out. That's why I want to make sure and get it right. Is that it does matter on the cost to value ratio. But it is still a great value, right? $80, that's starting to become sort of the bit nowadays. But for a knife that's this heavy, this substantial, it's not a lightweight knife. This is a solid knife that has a lot of weight and substantialness to it. I was expecting it to be a little lighter. There is no doubt about that. I was expecting it to be good. I was a little unsure. I was a little unsure about the button lock, but I thought I'd give it another shot with Vosteed here, and I'm really glad I did. They have done an outstanding job on this knife. They really, really have done extraordinarily well, and I'm excited about it. I hope they return back to some lighter weight designs. Instead of the 3.5 to, you know, the quarter pounder type stuff, the 3.5 plus ounces. But if they keep it so it's not too overbuilt, you don't keep getting into these giant 5 ounce, 9 ounce pocket knives. They're great for the collection, but they suck to carry. Like I know there's people who don't feel that way, but my goodness, for me, especially in the warmer climates where I live, I don't wear heavy duty clothes. Wearing a knife that is over 4 ounces most of the time, unless I'm going somewhere and I have a need for something like a pocket fixed blade, there's not a lot of point in me carrying a knife that heavy. And that's, I would love to see a more expensive, higher value. I don't want to say higher value, you know, better materials, but it's not necessarily going to be a higher value. What would you trade it for? S35VN and what? Titanium and carbon fiber? Like, you'll get better materials, but it isn't going to change how incredible this knife is. You may get something like 20 CV, or you may get something that has slightly better edge retention, but you'll lose toughness, right? 14C28N is a great balance of a steel, especially on a budget knife. And really all you're going to do is increase the balance, the overall balance this knife does. You're going to be like, how can I make this better? Okay, let's make carbon fiber in my Carta and S35VN or Magna Cut. Like, that's what you're going to have to do. And it's going to double or even triple the price. And you're not going to get 2 or 3 times the knife. You may get 2 to 3 times the edge retention, but you're not going to get 2 to 3 times the overall knife. So I actually don't have any significant requests except for a lighter weight version. You know, maybe try to keep the prices down to bring that value a little bit more. It's at I think I missed the number. It's a 92. It could, if this was a $60 knife, 59 instead of a $70 or $80 knife, it would be way higher. But it's just not there as far as overall value. The $80 price point, I'm starting to expect that level. But when I'm getting CJRBs with AR RPM 9 for something like $59, $55, stuff like that, it makes it really hard to be like, yeah, this is really cool, but is it a 50% increase better? You know, is it 30% better for the price? Those are the things we have to do. As long as we're looking at Chinese-made knives, we have to really do, is it really 30% better for the price? Not is it $20 better, is it 30% better? If other ones are going for 60 and this one's going for 80, and this is the numbers I'm going on because it makes it, then this is a third more than the other ones. So it could have a better cost to value ratio, but that doesn't mean it's a bad knife. Vosteed is killing it on value and with a lot of great offerings, and the Thornton is no different. So just to roll back on here, the design, different, unusual enough to be noteworthy, and it works incredibly well. The design not only looks good and has an interesting aesthetic, but the design is incredibly useful. All of the little tiny details that make this a good knife are obviously intentional, right? And it looks cool. It looks, there's other colors and stuff, but it has a nice two-tone coloring. It has pretty good designs. The pintail design gives you really, really good grip. So that's really hard to complain about. It's noteworthy in that it's relatively inexpensive. It's high quality for the price. You got the button lock, lots of fidget options. It's incredibly well designed, and it is obviously designed for EDC work. This is going to be easy to sharpen, have decent edge retention, high corrosion resistance, and extraordinary toughness for a stainless steel. That's important, and that's noteworthy, and it's part of the intended purpose. It's intended to be a high value, do anything, go anywhere, do whatever you can, be both a hard worker and a relatively lightweight, do everything EDC. It is a jack of all trades, and does it well. Its cost to value ratio is up there. It could be better, but with all of the little details, a couple of extra bucks to get some attention to detail, sometimes it's worth it. I expected it to be really good, and it's better than that. I expected it to be more lightweight, and it's not. But I really did expect Vosteed to do something good. Where it really blew me away is I did not expect Vosteed to have a button lock I was going to like. Kaiser has done several bad. They changed my mind with the Clairvoyant. And Vosteed is changing my mind on their button lock with the outstanding design, placement, and overall thoughtfulness in the engineering of this button lock. And so I really don't have any requests. If this was Nitro V, I'd be requesting 14C28N or something with better edge retention. But really on this, the only thing that I would say is you could do a similar value with either CPM 154 or S35VN with a slightly higher value in the $100 to $120 range. That might be the only thing close to a request I would have, because it's something that I think you could get a lot of value. That would be a high value add where you can get a slightly better steel. Maybe some micarta G10. The handled materials don't necessarily have to change, but you could even do like little carbon fiber or something, or some sort of inlay. All sorts of options to bump this up. Could be a fancier model. Would that be a request? I don't know. Bigger request, drop it 10, 20 bucks. That would be, wish we could do that with all prices. But all in all, it's a very good knife. Highly recommendable, decent price for everybody trying to stay under that $50, $60 range. The world's going up in price and wages aren't going with it. That's an old story since the 80s. It's just really starting to be extraordinarily visible all the time now. So yeah, that $70 price is just going up. But it's still a good value. CGRB is holding the line, and I love them for it. They're doing an outstanding job. They have a good formula, and they're utilizing it, and it's working out well for them, and I don't blame them. But Vosteed is coming through with different steels, different designs, really came out of nowhere and is bringing the heat with some of this execution and that sort of stuff. And they all, almost all of them, represent extraordinary values, and the Thornton is no different. So there you go, guys. The Vosteed Thornton, highly recommendable. Design is good. Aesthetics, I like them, you may not, but the unusualness of it does play out into a lot of effectiveness, which is part of the mechanics. The blade, the actual lock is fantastic. What does it come like from the factory? Well, we got something here to... Can you hear it? Try and do it where you can see it now. I'm shaking, trying to do it slow. I don't know if you notice how well that's cutting at even a slow pace. That thinness behind the edge, decent factory edge, cuts good. Mechanics are fantastic. It's noteworthy as being a great value EDC, which gives it a high cost to value ratio. Its intended purpose EDC is great. And if you expect this to uphold Vosteed's tradition, I don't want to say tradition, but so far its ability to put out high quality knives with great designs, you won't be disappointed. There are some things like it's a little bit heavier than you might think. You know, there's a couple other little details that may or may not. Hopefully this review gave you a little insight into that. And with that, I'm just going to let this go because this is absolutely an EDC beast. It is a package piercer. It is a shrink wrap slicer, a cardboard carver, and an envelope eviscerator extraordinaire. And with it being so good at that job, I'm going to go ahead and end this video. So this is the Thornton, highly recommendable, but go ahead and take this video, watch it twice, comment as much as you like, be mindful of side effects. Remember to like and subscribe. This has been your Dose of Drew. I am said Drew. You guys have a great rest of your night.